Hi, welcome to another video. So today I'm going to show you how to set up a simple frequency counter. I'm still using the Pic16F886 internal OSCON, no crystal or resonator. I've set up timer 1 to give me an interrupt every 1 second, which is counting here. I've got an external signal going into one of the capture pins, and that's down here. And then between the timer 1 and the capture, it's comparing how many signals are coming on the capture port to how many times the timer 1 interrupt is going, and giving us a frequency here. So I'm using the frequency generator, the wave generator, on this Keysight oscilloscope, and you can see at the moment it's set to 1 Hertz. So what's happening here is every time we get a signal, the counter 2 is incrementing, but once the timer 1 rolls over, it zeroes this counter. So because we know this is happening once a second, we can zero this, see how many times it counted, and give us the frequency. So if I turn the frequency up, so that's just 2 Hertz. Let's wind it up a bit more. So that's exactly 10 Hertz. You see there on the scope, 10 Hertz. This second counter on the capture pin is actually counting up to 10. Sometimes you can see the 10. And then as this timer 1 rolls over every second, it zeroes this counter. And we have the frequency of 10 Hertz. So wind the frequency up a bit more. So that's 100 Hertz. See there, 100 Hertz. We've got 100 clock inputs before this timer here rolls over and zeroes this counter. It's 110, very sensitive. 120. I've got my scope on fine scale at the moment, so that's 125 Hertz. That's exactly 132 Hertz. You can see there. That's 171, so you can see it's accurate to within 1 Hertz. So what I'll do, take the scope off the fine scale, and we'll start jumping up. .400 Hertz. I'm not sure if you'll be able to read this and this LCD, but if I wind this frequency up, so that's 610 Hertz. Hopefully you can see that. So that's exactly 1000 Hertz. And we've got exactly 1000 Hertz there, or sometimes 1001. So now the counter 2 is incrementing up to 1000, and then every second this comes along, counts how many times this is incremented, or captures the counter and zeroes it. So that's 2 kilohertz. Three kilohertz. Bearing in mind this timer 1 is going every second, so this effectively is updated every second. So that's 5600 set on the scope. 7,000, 8,000. Right, so we've got 8,000 Hertz, or 8 kilohertz. Now what's going to happen, as the frequency continues to rise, this frequency it's going to start interrupting the timer interrupt. So there's going to be lag here. So that's now 9 kilohertz on the scope, and you can see it got there, but these seconds are now struggling to increment because this is happening too quickly. So what I'll do, I'll wind it back down. So that's running happily at 8 kilohertz. You can see there. So what we can do, we can increase this timer speed. So instead of counting once a second, we can have it counting once every 250 milliseconds. And I'll give you a demonstration. So before I forget, this is the wiring setup today, and I'm using RC2 as the CCP1 capture. If you're not familiar with the LCD wiring, look at my LCD clock for beginners, just done a week or so ago. So before it gets too involved, I'm going to show you the code as it goes. So with the OSCON register set to 1 MHz, this is the timer 1 interrupt. It's giving me an interrupt every 1 second. And then on the interrupt, we clear the timer interrupt flag, preload the register so we keep on getting a 1 second interrupt. This is the counter incrementing every time we see a second. Frequency equals counter 2, and then counter 2 equals 0. So what's happening there, in the same interrupt routine, with the open bracket there, you can see if the capture, so if I scroll down, so during that interrupt, if we see a capture bit, we clear the capture flag and increment counter 2. So every time a rising edge is coming in, counter 2 is incrementing. And then as the timer interrupt every second is generated, so we look at what the counter got up to and 0 the counter, so then that starts counting again. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is the OSCON register. I've been running the clock on 8 megs. This is the bit 6, 5 and 4 of the OSCON register, so 6, 5 and 4. So this is setting the OSCON register to 1 megahertz. That's so I can get a 1 second interrupt to show you what's happening. These are taken from the capture register. So if you look capture mode, every rising edge 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So copy and paste these from the data sheet. So I'm capturing every rising edge and then 0 the counters, enabling the capture interrupt. This is the important port, so this is pin 2 is an input. All the pins digital, initializing the LCD, and then in the wire 1 simply converting the strings, so frequency to frequency string, put in the frequency there, and these are the 2 independent counters. As we get to higher frequencies we can delete these. Now you know what's happening. Right, so what I've now done, changed the OSCON to 8 MHz and changed the timer 1 interrupt to every 250 milliseconds, and we'll see how this performs. So 1 Hertz, 15 Hertz, right, scope's on 1000 Hertz, we have 999, oh, just flipped to 1000. So that was the limit on the previous setup. So now we've got 8000 kilohertz on the scope and we've got 7994. Now with this setting at quarter of a second interrupt, 250 milliseconds, we can go up to about 31-32 kilohertz. And you can see we've now got the minus sign, so 32 kilohertz is about the maximum we can measure with the 250 millisecond interrupt. So now what I'll do, instead of counting every rising edge, I'll show you the code. We'll count every 16th rising edge and change the timer interrupt to 1 microsecond. This is now my timer 1 interrupt every 1 millisecond, preloading the register with these values. And so the main, we've got the OSCON now running at 8 megs, still initialized timer 1, except where we were capturing every rising edge, we're now capturing every 16th rising edge. You can see 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, every 16th edge. So now you can see we're just capturing kilohertz. Right, you can see we're on 12 kilohertz and I'm capturing every 16th rising edge. So 23, should be 51. That should be 100. 237. 316. What I'm going to do now is change this to fine so we can capture this period here, which is 333 kilohertz. The display is slightly under reading. So this can obviously be calibrated in the software. You just pick another frequency. So that's measuring 333.34, and on the scope we've got 336.9. So you can see that's the pulse width, 1.488. The only thing with this microcontroller, we can't float the result. There's not enough RAM. So I set in the while 1 looking for 333, but that can be adjusted. So we're actually 1.488 microseconds there. And you can see there it's starting to change. So that's less than 1.5 microseconds. At 336, and we're actually on 340. But as I say, with some refinement in the code, that could be remedied. So I was looking for 333, all you do is up this figure. But that's pretty close, we're still on 1.47 microseconds, and that's exactly 1.5. Yeah, 1.5 microseconds. So as I say, this was a quick code. Yeah, measuring 1 hertz, now it's up at 328,000. So it's a little under reading, but you can calibrate that in the software. So just a quick example of a frequency counter. Hopefully you found this helpful. Thank you very much.